Hey, everybody. It's your pal Jay Stone. Welcome back to another year of Both Laugh, the Dying Scene Quarantine Chat Show. It seems strange to say, but it's the third calendar year that we've been doing this show now. Thanks to any of you that have caught one or more of the last 49 episodes, which means that we're up to number 50. First episode of 2022 was a really fun one. We got to chat with John San Juan of the band the Hushdrops, which some of you may know. They're based out of Chicago. They are sort of a power pop trio, I guess you will. They've been around for a long time. They put out their third album. It's called The Static on Pravda Records back in, well, I think officially back in November digitally. And then it came out on vinyl, thanks to Adele, a month or so later. But it is out, and you should be able to pick it up everywhere. And there are links down below wherever you're listening to this. Really fun chat with John. John does vocals and guitar for Hushdrops. He's joined in the band by Jim Shapiro, who plays bass, who some of you, if you are of a particular age, may remember from his several stints playing drums for Veruca Salt. He is that band Nina Gordon's brother. Really fun band. I'm sure you all know Seether and a bunch of other songs like that from the early to mid 90s. Great band. And John and Jim were both joined by Joe Camarillo on drums. And as you'll learn during our interview with John, Joe passed away rather untimely about a year ago. Just as they had most of the album done and recorded, there were still a few other stems that and bits and pieces that they wanted to finish up. So we talk a lot about Joe's influence on the band over the years, Joe's influence on this album, and on his posthumous sort of role in bringing the album to fruition. They had to do a few really interesting things when it came to recording over some of the drums that Joe had left on songs that weren't finished yet. So this was a really fun chat. Hopefully you all check it out. It's coming to you right after the intro music. Stay tuned. Catch you on the other side. Well, the recording's in progress. Happy New Year, gang. It is your pal, Jay Stone. As always, we are kicking off our third calendar year of doing Both Laugh, the Dying Scene Quarantine Chat Show, because quarantine doesn't seem to be going anywhere. I didn't think we'd get to episode 50, but we are here now at episode 50 of this little show that we started to kill time during the early days of COVID quarantine. And with this latest surge, seems like we're going to be able to keep the show going for a while. So we are joined for episode 50, which to me is a milestone, by a guy that we have talked about recently a couple of times within the last year, but never actually talked to. And that is John San Juan of long-running Chicago power trio Hushdrops. John, thank you for coming on the show. I'm excited about this.
Jay, Happy New Year. Thanks for having me here. I'm thrilled to be part of episode 50. That's pretty big.
I didn't know when we started doing this, well, just about 2 years ago now, I didn't know really what it would become. We started doing them just sort of over Instagram Live because, I don't know, it seemed like a thing to do and it was easy and people could give feedback. And it was a way to connect with people that had their plans shut down because of COVID, and whether it was tour dates or recordings or whatever, and didn't know how long it would go on. And so it's pretty cool to be at 50 episodes of a thing that we never even planned on doing. So I don't know, 50 seems like a cool number. So as I mentioned, we've talked about you a couple of times before on this show because we've been privileged to have the great Josh Caterer on not once, but twice. I think both times were in calendar year 2021, once at the beginning and once at the end, to talk about the two Josh Caterer trio albums, the hideout sessions and the space sessions. And I wonder, we've obviously talked to Josh at length about that process, but before we get into Hushdrop stuff, I was sort of curious to get your take on how that project came together and how that process was of recording what essentially were 2 live albums via live stream and in front of a non-existent crowd and all of that sort of really bizarre and interesting and only during a pandemic thing. So I wonder if you could talk about that part for a little bit.
Yeah, there's a lot to unpack there. Josh Caterer is, I'm a huge fan of his. Really admire his talent, every piece of it. So just getting the call from him was a bit shocking, in this sort of period of complete inactivity. And it says something to his creative mind that he just saw an opportunity there. Well, I can't do, street fairs or festivals,
Right.
but I could still play music and still get music out there and perform in a sense. So I didn't take any convincing. I was kind of like, would you like to play? Yeah, I'd like to play.
Yeah.
And that had been, honestly, if you're listening, Josh, that had been a long held dream of mine that, so that was great. But it was cool because the 3 of us, Josh and I and John Perrin, and I've played with John before, but the 3 of us was such a new thing. And, those first few times we went into a rehearsal space with these sort of very bare bones arrangements of Josh's, just, he would basically have a key for a song and, some idea of a guitar part. And, that was really exciting and really going from nothing. It was going from 0 to 100. It was going from sort of nothing to complete. All right, we're building this from the ground up and it's this new crew. And, oh, and by the way, we set a date. So we're going to have all this stuff ready and be on camera in 2 weeks. It was almost like I just watched, I don't know if you watched the Beatles Get Back over the holidays.
I haven't watched it yet, no.
But it was a similar thing where, looking back, it seems like, well, God, why would you set such a lofty goal in a short, there was a lot, but it worked. And I think that the pressure of you've got to be camera ready and album ready and sort of first take camera and album ready in 2 weeks was, that was a positive. I think it brought out something in everybody that was really cool. So it had this, and this is before, I think we were just starting to hear murmurings about, well, possibly seniors and medical personnel will be getting vaccinated in a few months. So it was really exciting to be able to communicate like that. And so the project just had this kind of built-in goodwill attached to it. And I guess unlike anything I've ever done. And we've become this band family since then, because as the, obviously the next thing was, well, let's do another one of these, because, and then, right, when we got into the summer and things were opening up to the extent that we were able to get out and start playing in front of people. And it's this whole new brotherhood that I would have never even dreamed into existence. So, the fact that Josh could sort of foresee all of that is pretty remarkable from my point of view.
Yeah, and the ability to make something out of what has been a prolonged, really dark period, for lack of a better phrase, is to be able to be creative that way and to still continue to put out things when maybe your A plan and B plan and C plans for the years weren't able to pan out. So to be able to actually get together and pull something new out of that is amazing. Also, it sounds really good. That first record sounds really good. And you and John, for a rhythm section that hadn't played really much together at all, and certainly hadn't played those songs very much.
Right.
You guys are tight.
Well, thank you. Yeah, I mean, there's something about the sort of, I feel like the mechanics of a band, of an ensemble, is that, yeah, I have whatever abilities I have, and as do the other two, but what you deliver in that situation, what you discover in that situation is some new gear that you switch into, because, well, I got to play like this now because that's what Josh's voice is bringing out in me, and that's what John's drumming, and likewise all of us with each other. I think we found, Josh had told me, and may have told you as well, that whatever he had sort of envisioned the three of us sounding like, once we actually started playing together, he was like, okay, well, it's actually not that at all. It's some undiscovered thing, but it's for sure, just all of us reacting to each other's instincts.
And we very much talked about the fact that the first album was sort of billed as a Josh Caterer solo album, and the second one, the Space Sessions, is very much billed as the Josh Caterer trio. And so the sort of emphasis on that, it isn't just Josh's solo project, it's that you guys are a tangible three-headed monster now.
Yeah, and again, I would have never dared to dream of it.
Right.
It's wonderful, and and even the friendship that the three of us have is a sort of very strong but very new thing that was born out of this experiment.
Obviously, from playing in Hushdrops, playing guitar and especially singing in Hushdrops, does that, when working in a different role in a power trio still, so the sort of dimensions of the band are the same as Hushdrops, but you play sort of a different role. So does your sort of longtime position as the vocalist and guitar player in a power trio give you sort of a different understanding for what Josh was trying to do and what you three collectively are trying to do now that you're playing bass in that project?
Oh, conceivably. I guess the only thing that you would learn from leading a band for 3 decades is that if you go in a sort of supporting role, pay attention to the boss, that my feeling was I was going to play whatever I could get away with, and eventually Josh or John Perrin would say, oh my God, will you stop doing that? And that never quite happened, but that's sort of what I figured, that was my stop sign. Again, I mean, a lot of things now as I describe them relate to being a parent, and that's one of them that you see with children, where they're sort of well, I'll know the limit when I hit it, but why inhibit yourself in advance?
Right. I'm going to do this till you tell me not to.
Yeah. So that was what I sort of went into this with. Yeah.
Yeah. How old are your kids, by the way? I'm just sort of envisioning my daughter and her, she's going to be 14 on Wednesday, but that definitely remember those periods of like looking back at you and to see if this is an thing for me to do. And if you don't shake your head no, then I'm going to do it, whether it's jumping on the couch or playing with a instrument or whatever.
That's sort of, right. That very sort of like faux stealth eye contact where like, okay, I know you're looking at me, even though you're kind of making some effort to be slick about it.
Right.
Mine are 12 and 16, two boys. And so, developmentally, just a lot of the same stages that you're in as a parent. It's sort of adjacent,
Although I guess I feel like really it never stopped. Like the things that they're trying to do and those boundaries they're trying to push don't change. Those things change, but I guess the trying to push boundaries never changes. Like what the boundaries are, it's going to be a little different, but instead of, maybe it's staying up late, maybe it's, not doing homework,
sure.
or it's, being on the phone or being on the iPad or whatever.
Oh yeah. And I mean, it's interesting. Obviously there's an increased range for reasoning,
Yeah.
with that I think we're all thankful for, but it's only so increased,
Right. Agreed. And I say that as a 42-year-old, it's only so increased.
Yeah, I say it with a lot of love. Yeah.
Right. So let's talk about the Static. The Static is the new Hushdrops record. It came out technically, I guess, somewhere between November and December, based on backups and based on how Adele gummed up the works of getting everybody's vinyl pressed for a year.
I feel very lucky to have gotten our vinyl. Look, I mean, see, I've actually got a copy here.
That's wonderful.
So that was a because that wasn't a sure thing,
Yeah.
And right. So, it's here, and there was a sort of, this, I'm going to say low level anxiety, because I'm 52. So I think my anxieties are starting to get a little more, whatever, manageable.
Yeah.
The scale is changing.
Right.
But thinking like, oh God, we're going to have all of this huge publicity campaign, and then the album's going to get here in 2 years,
Right.
So yeah, the fact that everything's kind of reasonably peachy with that is nice. I think there was a month between sort of, pre-orders, digital release, and LP, and that's really on the lucky side at the moment, for sure.
I think one of the nice things, at least in my experience, in interacting with Pravda Records, is that they sort of wait till it seems like there is an actual date to launch that stuff. Some labels will launch pre-orders and then you just kind of get it when you get it. And so I will routinely get packages that show up that I forgot that I had ordered because
so surprise albums,
10 months later. Yeah, but I do like that Pravda seems to wait until the end, and there's not much lead time. It's like, okay, pre-order it and it's going to be out within the next couple of weeks. I kind of like that.
Oh, it's it's a thing, and I know that the space sessions, there's a bit, the lag is a little greater.
Yeah.
And I don't think Josh handed in our record much later than I did mine, but
Really?
somehow that distance of a month or whatever it was just, prohibitive enough.
I'm fine with blaming Adele for that. That's
sure. Yeah, no, she had it coming. Yeah.
How long a process was it? So there's obviously some gravity behind the album that we'll discuss in a minute, but how long a process was it between when the album was done and submitted until it actually was released?
Well, I remember sending Ken Goodman at Pravda, sending him rough mixes in sometime in March, and just saying like, oh, this is, and we had already done the deal for the Josh record, so we were developing a friendship and business relationship, and I sent him the stuff. I was just sending him song after song, and at some point, like, yeah, let's do this, but John, if we're going to do this, I'm going to need everything from you. I need it yesterday. So on my end, that just kind of meant making whatever the last two, for the final sessions of overdubbing and mixing, and make them happen as quickly as possible. And yeah, so I think I shipped the album sides, the mixes, off to the mastering house in late April. So quite honestly, by that metric, having an album, by Christmas,
7-8 months. Yeah.
I can't complain about that.
As I mentioned before, there's obviously some gravity behind this album. For those that don't know, Hushdrops have been a power trio for the better part of 2 decades anyway. Joe Camarillo was the drummer. He passed away almost a year ago at this point, sort of early and unexpectedly. And so that brought, as I understand it, sort of a real weight to the decision to put the album out and to sort of pull it together as a finalized thing. And so how done was it prior to Joe's passing? Was everything mostly done, or?
It was in a state, I mean, God, mostly done. I couldn't put
Yeah.
it better. It was in a real state of mostly done. And it was in a real state of mostly done when everything shut down in 2020. We had recorded, I think we'd done 2 sessions one in 18 and one in 19, and we had all of this material, and it was like, well, the plan was, okay, spring of 2020, we'll record, the final, 2 or 3 or 4 load-bearing songs that would really tie the room together. And then that plan went on hold, obviously. And, and Joe and I talked about it constantly. We had this, messenger thread that was just, it was active every day until it wasn't, and we were always talking about the band and the record and what we were gonna get up to. And so when he died, I wasn't thinking about the album, no, certainly not initially. It was just
Sure.
this this a lot, this shock and sadness and bereavement and whatever happens when your best friend is gone unexpectedly like that. And I think that it must have been maybe a month later or thereabouts, or month and a half later, where I started thinking, we have this, all of this music that we recorded in the last, our last couple years as a band. And I felt like it just had a certain strength to it and a certain quality to it that, to my way of thinking, it'd be a real shame to just sit on this. And so, and that was also kind of the thing that pulled me out of that initial stage of grief,
Right.
And I think that I hear this a lot, this sort of a common thing, like whatever, the surviving members of Queen throwing that big thing for Freddie at Wembley. Like, okay, well, all right, we've got a project, we've got a goal now, we've got all this sort of graft ahead of us. And so I looked at what we had and what we didn't have. We had a lot. There were a couple of songs that we'd been playing in our last few years that were, they were pretty special. And I think about, is there some way to get them on the record? And there had actually been a gig that we'd done a couple years before Joe died that, unbeknownst to us, had been recorded. And we sort of knew about this, but at the time it was like, well, it was in a brewery, and we probably sounded like people who had been drinking free beer all night,
and didn't know they were being recorded.
Yeah, right, exactly. So it wasn't something that we had sought out. But then in the sort of stage of picking up the pieces last year, I thought, well, I should reach out to the guy who recorded it and see if he still has the multi-tracks. And he did, and I listened to them, and there's 2 songs that we used from it where Joe's performances were not just adequate, but like explosively spectacular. And that gave a lot of the mojo and the energy to the sort of the idea of finishing the record. It's like, okay, well, now we've got, not only do we have what we had, but we have something that honestly raises the bar a little bit. We've got to do it now.
Right.
And so that was a pretty short journey then to just, okay, what do we need to finish this? And I had a couple of demos that John Perrin actually drummed on, also songs that we had intended to record with Joe. So yeah, the bulk of it is, dedicated sessions that were meant to be a record, and yet some of the most striking stuff was kind of, gaffer taped and chewing gum,
Yeah.
affixed. Yeah. After,
Right.
right. But, so and in some way that's given me an affection for it beyond what I might normally have for an album.
It's interesting. You mentioned that, and I don't think I knew that piece about that part of it being recorded live, but there's a point late in the album, and I'm trying to I feel like it's one of the last couple songs, Secrets, or maybe somewhere back there, that that it seems like there's crowd noise sort of at the very end of the song. And I went, oh, that's interesting. So I'm assuming that would be one of the tracks that kind of got left on.
Right. And there was something so novel about the crowd noise as it existed, because it wasn't an idea like, let's have crowd noise on the record. There was something so novel about that particular crowd noise, because that song, as we arranged it, had this very abrupt ending. So the crowd noise has this weird kind of crescendo of surprised people deciding to applaud.
Right.
And you can hear the like, oh, yeah,
right.
And so that applause is there by virtue of its silliness.
Was the rest of that, with the performance that's on the record, is the rest of that from that live performance too, or did you guys go back in and then re-record your parts?
Oh, I gave myself the liberty of doing a sober lead vocal on it. I thought it
almost spit out my seltzer on that one.
Yeah, you know what? You may as well, sing the words that you wrote. And and I felt like, well, God, Joe has set such a standard with his drumming on this track. Jim and I may as well make our contributions as as fantastic as they could be. And it also created a sort of opportunity. So not only to sort of present the songs in a semi-polished fashion, but also, it was one last chance to work with Joe's playing.
Sure.
So yeah, it's this, right? Secrets and Psychic Space is the other song.
Oh, okay.
Similarly derived. Yeah.
That's got to be a different challenge. That's probably a unique challenge in trying to record studio parts. And I say this as a completely untrained musician, but trying to record studio parts over a live drum track. And I don't just mean live in the studio, but live performance, because there's a different energy and there's a different sort of ambiance, and the whole thing is very different. So trying to put all that stuff in the right spot when you're recording a studio version over a live drum, that's got to be an interesting challenge.
Yeah. Oh yeah, it's very different. And of course, the three of us playing, not knowing we were being recorded, again, I don't want to overuse the word brewery, but it's relevant. All of that, it's just such a different thing from the three of us playing live in the studio and kind of knowing that the tape is rolling and whatever, the clock is ticking, all of those things. It's a lot freer, and people are taking different kinds of chances. You're taking chances in either case, but I think live is so in the moment that it was odd. We sort of had to figure out how to do it. So if we're putting these like slightly more, we can't be too precise in what we put on it, because then it just doesn't match, you know?
Right.
So this mixture between sort of, arranging it, but also like letting it breathe, I guess. And I especially felt because I was so into what Joe had played, I thought, well, I need to keep my contributions more simple than I normally would in a band situation, because I really want his improvisations to be front and center. And that's, I mean, that was kind of the structure of the band always, was that it was like, one of those things where, yeah, I guess I was singing and I was playing guitar and I'd written most of the material, but having a drummer like Joe in the band, really, for me, the focal point was always, and the sort of make or break thing, the thing that made a gig or a recording as special as it could be, or maybe when it didn't achieve liftoff, it was, for me, that was always Joe's drumming. So it was kind of like having Jimi Hendrix back there on the drums and trying to front a band and sing in front of that.
Yeah.
And it worked. But to my mind, when we were on stage or when we were recording, I always felt like, well, he's really calling the shots here, and he's leading this in a very, in a way that was, we never spoke about it or planned it, but that was just the dynamic of the band.
Are there songs that change, particularly on this album, that changed from time to time, from when you initially sort of fleshed them out and then presented them to Jim and Joe and had their sort of input, and knowing that, like, if Joe wanted to take a song in a different direction that you didn't see, was that sort of a normal thing?
Oh yeah. And I learned really early on that, well, I learned really early on that, I mean, I had a responsibility, like, the composition had to be compelling, the, chords and melody and lyrics. And, but beyond that, its actual shape was always going to be something that we discovered through playing together. And it could go pretty, it could go a real long way. Something like, I don't know, I had a room, the way that kind of rises and falls at the end and all of that, like, that's not something that I would have conceived of. And that came from, just both of them getting a hold of it, and just that openness, letting it go where you're, that sort of the trust exercise, letting it go where they want to take it,
Yeah, that's a sort of big song to end the album. If people haven't heard it yet, I Had a Room it's got to be, what, 6 minutes long, something in there. There's a couple of really big, like, jam guitar solo things, which I think are some of my favorite parts of Hushdrops, but I say that as a failed guitarist. Between Secrets and that song, the guitar work is some of the best on the album. But yeah, that's it's not a short, sweet, compact power rock song. It's this big sort of, like you said, there's some peaks and valleys and a few crescendos involved, and yeah, that's a big song. And I actually would have guessed, not knowing, if you had told me that there were a couple of songs that were recorded at least part live, I would have assumed maybe that was one of them, because of the way that it kind of flows and jams and stretches out. And so I would have picked that as a song that came from a bigger jam.
Well, God, if I'm going to brag on these guys, which is, it's my job. I think it's my job in life, really. It's that, as we went along as a band, the thing that we continually discovered more and more, was that our best feature was the sort of unscripted element, I guess the more wild, risk-taking, and just kind of imperfect, really. Like, the scrappier it got, the more it seemed like, oh, well, then that sounds like music now, it's exciting. And as opposed to sort of master building, like making a Lego set and coming in and really, okay, like, we can't have any noise before the track, and you sped up a little bit there. Like, the further we got away from those sort of, okay, is everybody in tune? The further we got away from all of the sort of scaffolding, the more, and I can't speak to anyone else's enjoyment of it, but for the three of us, it really came to life and became something that we were more and more, oh, okay, so now so that became the thing we started looking for or responding to. And, the takes that we did, there was a day of recording in the summer of 2019 where we had cut 10 songs that day. And it was the day that we did I Had a Room, among others. And I remember that day, like it's like we'd finally arrived at that place of sort of peak unhinged, peak, like looking for the, obviously, yeah, you didn't want to have some horrible glitch or error in there that just kind of undermined the song. But whenever the happy space is, like I Had a Room, where it's kind of has a slightly unpredictable dynamic feel. That was always when we thought, okay, well, that's the take, and that took a lifetime of being in a band together to realize that, even on some subconscious level, that was what we liked about our collective.
Did you record most of that stuff live in the studio together?
Yeah, that was an idea. That was an idea that Joe had hatched a couple albums ago, where it was the first record that we made was just me and Joe. And for a lot of reasons, it was pretty polished and fairly precise, and on that level, sufficiently effective. But I know a few years later, when we talked about, making another album, his idea was like, well, I think the only thing that would really be interesting would be sort of trying to capture our live sound. If we could do that on an album, then, that'd be something worth doing. And there were these points of reference. The one I'm thinking of right now is Van Halen. Like, their first handful of albums have this real, well, certainly there's an energy to them, and they're not overly precise, and there's just an excitement there or whatever. And it was an experience that we'd had on stage a few times. Thought like, well, wait a minute, why don't our records sound like that? And obviously it's a thing that can be done. That can be harnessed or marshaled or untamed in some way. So yeah, that was the type of suggestion that Joe would make, and it just grew and grew until, and so yeah, as a requirement of that, it always meant the three of us playing at the same time. And you probably, this may be a thing that I know it appears in books and interviews and maybe other musicians that you've spoken to, where people will talk about things like, yeah, Jim's headphones fell off when we were doing the take, and that almost made us say, okay, well, this has got to be the one.
Yeah. There's who was I talking to? And this wasn't for any sort of interview, but the band Face to Face, California punk rock band for 30 years or so now. I've become good friends with them over the years, and friends with a guy that recorded a few of their albums. His name is Chad Blinman. He lives in Boston now and teaches at Berkeley. He kind of moved away from the studio recording thing. And I remember they went on hiatus, 2001, 2, somewhere in there. And the last album they recorded before that, I know they recorded sort of live as a 3-piece in studio. And I know that there are parts in there where I think the drummer cracked a cymbal or something. I know that he dropped a stick at some point, like somebody dropped a pick somewhere along the line, but that's the take that ended up. And it's things you don't necessarily know unless you get told that and then go back and listen to it. And it gives it like this whole different energy. But I've always, maybe it's I know you've referenced Crazy Horse in a few other interviews, but that's very much like, that's sort of my reference point for a lot of that stuff, is Neil going in the studio in the barn and hitting record, and that's what came out. You never knew if it was going to go off the rails or who was going to be playing fast and slow. And when it worked, it was brilliant, and when it didn't work, it was a mess. But that's part of the thing,
Right, it's a risk worth taking.
Sure.
If you're into it. Yeah. And no, what you're saying about Face to Face, it's funny, that's a thing, like dropping a stick or cracking a cymbal or having something fall over. it wakes you up.
Yeah.
I'll definitely say that about it. And so that in itself is an energy that you couldn't contrive,
Right. But I think also that maybe the punk rock, garage rock, indie, whatever we call this sort of spectrum, it sort of lends itself to that in a way that maybe some other, more poppy things don't.
No, I don't think Adele's going to be watching this and say, you know what, I'm going to have, this is what I want for my next record,
Right. We're just going to the studio and press record and see what happens.
35 is going to have a real, unhinged energy to it.
Oh, I can only imagine how long the vinyl wait will be.
Oh yeah.
For the Adele Crazy Horse album.
Okay. Yeah. No, it's that's a thing, and I know I'm not the only person you've spoken to who's in this.
Oh yeah.
And again, stressing that I feel that I'm on the luckier half of it, for sure. But it is funny that Adele has really, I mean, instantly became the face of that issue. Yeah.
And obviously it's not just Adele, it's the big labels and it's the reissuing of albums that everybody already has 7 copies of, and it's the whole thing, and it's all that Record Store Day has become, the sort of commercial and whatever. I could go on and on and on, but it's the whole thing, and she just became sort of the face of it, I think.
Oh yeah. And I wonder, because it's not like you can just, like, vinyl presses, like, manufacturing them and, having the personnel to use them properly. Like, it's not like you could just rise up to meet that demand overnight either. That seems like a slow process. Yeah, I was concerned about it. Over the summer, there were things, Record Store Day had always kind of irked me a little. I thought there's a lot of inessential, like, there is a used copy 5 feet over there for $2.99.
Right.
I mean, I suppose it's not on colored vinyl, but I guarantee you it sounds better and it's cheaper. And it's just got a certain mojo to it.
Sure.
So that sort of, obviously I feel like that consumerism kind of ate its own tail in some way. And then seeing, actually a lot of artists that I really love, these sort of legacy artists, like the reissue people like the Beatles and George Harrison, and they'd put something out, it'd be like, okay, there's 20 different versions of this, and there's like an 8 LP and a 5 LP and one on splatter vinyl. It seemed like a lot of inessential, like, is anyone really gonna sit around every day and listen to outtakes on vinyl?
Right. Or live albums or Adele albums, frankly. I can't imagine that. Even though they printed 500,000 copies, I think it was, of her album, I think that's sort of why that's become the one that has pissed people like me off, is I can't imagine her target audience being the kind that's going to listen to it on vinyl.
Surely you could just turn on the radio and it would be playing,
or on Spotify, and you'll never know what order the songs are on, because that's not how younger generations consume music, really.
Right. If it's something that you're, sort of listening to as accompaniment at the gym or whatever.
Right.
No, and I can't imagine that, like, 500,000 people are going to go out and, set up these hi-fi systems so that they can listen to this title.
Listen, I would be willing to bet that 300,000 of them anyway are going to exist on the shelves of Targets and Walmarts around the country for years and years and years to come. They printed all of them, but they're not going to get sold.
Yeah, you and I know that you with, like, thrift store vinyl and that sort of thing, there's those titles. I know sort of Herb Alpert, Whipped Cream and Other Delights is the biggie, but, like, there's all these things like The First Family and My Fair Lady and all these things that just, my whole lifetime I would just flip through. Barry Manilow Live, these sort of classics that, like, you go to any Goodwill or Salvation Army in the country and you'll be able to build this very specific collection of these
Right.
dozen titles. And I feel like in 10 years time, it will be, like
You'll still be able to go to Target, and get the same album. Yeah.
Right. I'm assuming, and whatever the most recent Taylor Swift thing.
Yeah.
Was that like a 4 LP? Do you know that? Do you know about this? That it was pressed at 45 RPM.
Oh, right.
So it's like a 4 LP edition, which just sounds also absurdly expensive. Just at the retail level.
Yeah, and I know only from checking Twitter. Do we have that album? I'm trying to think. I do have a soon to be 14-year-old daughter, so we have our fair share of Taylor Swift albums, and I have become Team Taylor over the years. I sort of used her as the one that I hope my kid never listens to Taylor Swift, but I have since changed my tune on that, I think, because of a lot of what she's gone through professionally. And I like the fact that she's sort of reclaimed her music from the people that own the masters and that whole thing. But I also know that there's a lot of people that don't know what 45 RPM albums are. And so when they put them on, a lot of complaining on Twitter about how the new Taylor album sounds like shit.
This album's not very good. Yeah, right. Yeah, right. No, that's and a perfectly valid, thing not to know about. Right?
Sure. And I know that I have albums in my collection that are at a different speed than I expected them to be. I think either the White Stripes or Jack White singularly has done a few weird things like that with records over the years. And so I know that there are records that I first put on and go, well, this sounds like garbage, but that's because I had it at the wrong speed because I wasn't reading.
Yeah, I feel like in the sort of original, like indie rock, hardcore, sort of underground, whatever the American underground boom of the 80s, that a lot of artists would, self-release this real DIY stuff, and you'd never know what speed something was at. So there, would be singles or EPs that, the first few times I played them at the wrong speed and didn't necessarily think, it was either like, oh, these guys are heavy.
This is sludgy.
Yeah, right on, man. Or these guys are kind of manic.
My vinyl collecting years didn't come until sort of after that, so I should go back and try to piece together some of the stuff that I've listened to forever, just didn't have it on vinyl, and try to check some of it out. Where was I going with that? Oh, so one of the things that I think is interesting about Hushdrops, and I think that sort of lends itself to giving your band a little bit of a different feel. I mean, we've talked about that Hushdrops were a power trio, but there's a lot of different layers. It's not just guitar, bass, vocals, drums. There's keyboards, and I feel like there's strings sometimes and horns sometimes, and maybe a mellotron or whatever.
I am a mellotron owner. Yeah,
that is what that is, because as I was listening, I went to what song was it? Because I actually made note of it. I forget, but I was like, oh, is that a mellotron?
Yeah, no, I've been trying to, I think a lot of us have been trying to bring the mellotron back. And, what had to happen is there was a guy in Sweden who started making them again and made like a more stable, portable digital version that, you can throw it in a road case and take it on tour, and you don't need a dedicated tech to spend 5 hours making it work every day. So once that happened, it seemed like, okay, well, we can have all the mellotron we want, and I'd gone to see the Zombies, 5 or 6 years ago, and it's like, well, this sounds like the real thing. This sounds incredible, and that looks like something I could just put on my arm and carry. Really the big step was, I think, just telling my wife I'm gonna spend $2,000 on an instrument.
Right. Tell your wife she's married to a mellotron guy now. And
so when I got when I got it about 6 years ago, this is funny. and you have to write to the guy who makes them. It's very much
Oh,
like,
really?
yeah, it's very much like, well, look, this is the only game in town, and okay, well, this is what I can get it to Chicago and for this much, and yeah, I've got one ready, and but one of the things that happens is that you get a Mellotron bumper sticker. That's one of the things that comes with it. Now, and I didn't feel that I was buying a $2,000 bumper sticker,
Right.
but I guess Jim Shapiro, the bass player for Hushdrops, put this really well. He's like, the sort of person who's going to buy a Mellotron is the sort of person who is going to go ahead and put the Mellotron sticker on their car.
Absolutely.
And, so I'd find myself showing up for things over the years and like, yeah, that's you with the Mellotron sticker, isn't it? That's your car, isn't it? Like, how'd you know?
Right. Why the decision to add those sort of different layers and textures to, because I know we talked about sort of recording live in the studio, and it's tough to add all those elements, obviously, when you're recording live in studio, but why the decision to add all those different textures and layers to rather than just keep it traditional power trio?
That's a good question. Some of it is, I think there's a moodiness and maybe just mood, that was easier to communicate, or is easier to communicate on certain, sounds. Like, okay, well, if we have these kind of like sad chords on a string setting on the Mellotron, or, that adds a certain, it's a form of shorthand. I don't know. It's communicating something that just a hard rockin' band unadorned isn't able to, so it's all, I mean, I feel like it's all used fairly sparingly, but you always know where it's weird. It's like there's a hole in the music or something, like, or it's like putting syrup on pancakes, or, gravy on biscuits.
Yeah.
That's kind of how I feel about it. And sometimes you're like, no, this needs, right, these pancakes need syrup. They don't always need syrup.
No.
But sometimes they do.
Or sometimes they need whipped cream and sprinkles, as my kid likes.
Right. Oh, exactly. Yeah. Or right, or to have what is the cereal that they bake into pancakes now? It's Fruity Pebbles.
Oh, wow.
Have you seen these?
I don't feel like I have.
They're beautiful, they look really nice on a pancake. But it's funny, like, maybe I'm such a dinosaur here that I'm like, I wouldn't want that crunchy texture in a pancake.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. Yeah. Maybe in a waffle, I guess, but not in a pancake.
I might be the problem. Yeah.
I know I was just sort of perusing social media before we were talking, and I know that there were plans for a show this coming Friday, but obviously because of the third or fourth or however many waves we're in now, I don't know. We're in the biggest one. I don't know how it is everywhere in the country, but it is far and away the biggest wave in terms of volume of cases right now in the greater Boston area. It's gnarly.
So, right. I mean, I'm assuming, like, without prying too much, that you've probably like done the thing where, if you go on wherever you see your friends, like online, you go on Facebook or Instagram or Twitter or whatever, and you look up, and I felt like every day for the past month or so, a couple of people, I consider close friends, be like, yeah, well, I tested positive, and that was a little jarring, because the experience, as grave as it always was, it seemed a little more remote.
Yeah, right.
And that everyone in my house has had it by now, and that sort of thing. I mean, it seemed like, and even just, you book a show. I think we booked the show a month ago, and it seemed like, all right, booking a show. It's like the fact that even in that short an amount of time, like, okay, this is a week away, and I don't think we should do it. I don't think we
Yeah.
should get people together.
Yeah.
I guess, yeah, when you think about the potential, the potential cost of doing that, like, yeah, we invited all our friends to this place and they're all sick now and they're,
Right. Right.
it's pretty easy to,
Right.
to say, we can postpone this.
Yeah.
But I guess everyone's doing it, at the moment.
Yeah. We bought tickets to a show in New Jersey this coming weekend. We bought them, I don't know, 6 weeks ago, something like that, when we were in New Jersey for another show. And this show got announced. I said, yeah, I mean, things were trending in a better direction. Numbers were creeping up maybe a little bit, but it was also November. So that was going to happen anyway. And man, I don't know if the show's going to happen. I think it might be on, but then do you drive all the way to New Jersey to go to a show? And I'm,
Oh
you
man.
know, I'm obviously I'm triple vaxxed and we have good masks and all that stuff. But then do you want to do that whole thing? And do you want to be the reason to break that? Like it comes into the house and I don't know. It's a
Oh,
whole
right.
thing.
Like what? Yeah. How do you actually calculate the
Yeah.
potential risk? That's a
Yeah.
hard thing to do. Right. When is this anyways, this event?
Saturday, the 8th,
Oh, wow.
down in New
Yeah.
Jersey. Yeah. Ben Nichols from the band Lucero plays a solo show every year at this little club in Garwood, New Jersey, which is nowhere. And if anybody listening is from New Jersey, I've had people from New Jersey, when you tell them that you're going to Garwood, they say, where the hell is that? It's this
Oh, sure.
it's a wonderful little club run by really wonderful people. It's a club called Crossroads, and they have really great people come in. And Ben from Lucero plays an annual one-off show there every year for some reason, and it sells out like way in advance. But this was probably the 5th year doing it, and I don't know, it feels kind of weird.
Right. I wonder. Yeah. And it was the same thing I felt, when I, because I talked to Josh a few days ago and I'm like, because he was going to be opening this
Mhm.
this show. And I was like, what do you think, Josh? And it was like a minute of us talking to each other. It was like, okay, well, clearly this is a bad idea.
Yeah.
And now is not the time. And there was some amount of like, well, do I want to play chicken with the venue?
Yeah, right.
Because you're always, I'm a habitual buck passer, so I was
Right.
happy for someone else to make the decision.
Right.
But at some point, it's like, well, no, this is my
That
this is my decision to make here.
Right. That has always been, I've been hoping secretly to get the email from the club saying we're postponing, because then it's not, then I don't have to be the one
Oh
to say,
yeah.
we're not going. I don't know if you ever watched Brooklyn Nine-Nine. That's one of the shows that we sort of binged during quarantine because my kid loves it. And there's a character on that show whose last name is Boyle, and he talks about the family method of decision making is to wait till the last possible minute and let somebody else decide for you. And
Oh
I
yeah.
was like, oh, that is exactly how the way I've been. I've just never put it into words like that.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. Yeah. And there was we had plans to, and you may have heard this from Josh, we had a tour planned for early February, and it seemed like the same thing. Like, yeah, things might be a little better then, but still, like, if the risk is the three of us having to stay in a hotel in Phoenix for 10 days before we can
Yeah.
come home,
Right.
maybe now's not the time,
Right. Yeah. I don't know. I mean, I know we're all going to get it anyway. I know it's been like a game of whack-a-mole really for the last
Right.
couple of years. And
Right.
somehow there's a good meme going around. If it's an old Super Mario Brothers clip where Mario is like
Yes.
running and all of the fire spinning thing, and he's kind of dodging, and it legitimately feels like it's been like that.
Oh no, I remember I was laying in bed with my wife when I scrolled down to that.
Yeah.
Like, honey, look at this.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
she's like,
My wife sent it to me.
There it
That's
is.
exactly right. Yep.
Yeah, no, that's really funny because I'm of the generation to have Mario skills.
Absolutely. Yeah.
But like those levels, that's more like my kid. Like, oh yeah, I'll do that.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I guess one of the things that's, I don't know if it's funny, if it's not, but the fact that we're in, the third year, going into the third year, I hated saying it out loud.
Yeah, yeah,
and whatever wave we're going into, there is, I want to say that there is a certain personal zen and acceptance at this stage that like about things getting canceled or postponed or rescheduled. It's like, you know what? It's cool.
yeah,
Whereas, it seemed devastating. Whatever things, whatever plans any of us had 2 years ago,
yeah,
like, well, what do you mean I'm not going to be able to? And I think some people really got, some people who may have appeared to be insensitive or callous in that moment. I am really willing to extend the benefit of the doubt and say, I think that was shock for a lot of people. Like, well, no, come on. We're in the middle of the country. We're in the middle of a tour.
yeah,
How bad can it possibly be?
yeah, yeah. Yeah, I've talked to, like I said, sort of at the beginning, part of what prompted this show to even happen was talking to people that went through canceling plans and how they sort of pivoted and how they stayed creative. And I've talked to a few people that actually in a few different waves now, we're essentially just outrunning cancellation dates, especially that first wave where you didn't really know. And we had people that were over in Europe on tour and you didn't know how close to the end you were going to have to cut your tour and what borders were going to close when, and would you be able to get back to the States? And then even more recently, another Chicago band, Kalimasi, was just over in Europe, and they had to cancel some of their European tour, but not all, because things were getting elevated in some places and not others. And a year and a half into the pandemic, still the same thing happening. But yeah, you kind of have to give the benefit of the doubt to all those people, especially 2 years ago, because we didn't know what was coming up.
Oh yeah, and I gotta say it was nice, this past summer and fall, spring, summer, and fall, like all of those opportunities to perform music outside and go see music outside. And there were, whatever that window was between, the initial, okay, everyone's vaxxed. We haven't started using the word Delta yet, like that little period
Right.
there.
Right. Well, I forgot about the before Delta era.
I think we all, really made as much hay as we could and enjoyed as much music as we could. And it's weird to think that like the Rolling Stones were on tour, like just the sheer number of bodies being crammed into,
Right.
and it's not like, they haven't gone down in history as like, that these were awful super spreader events or whatever.
Right.
So there was, I guess it's one of those things. So I'm thankful for everything we had when we had it, and we're going into another winter, and that's going to mean some different things. I'm, thankful that venues, in the main are doing everything to protect their patrons, so, whatever. This may be my third time trying to go see The Darkness, in the past few years.
Right.
And it may not be successful. But it all starts to carry less of a sting,
Yeah.
as you enter this stage of it,
Yeah, and there becomes sort of a dark humor to it too. Like, how many times can the same show get rescheduled?
Oh
And
yeah.
you come up on, you could do a full another album or two in between the last album cycle that somebody didn't get to tour on, and now you get to, like, people are putting out second albums that they haven't toured the last ones yet, and it's a
Oh
whole
yeah.
thing. Yeah, I don't know. You have to
Yeah.
have some sort of dark humor to get through the whole thing, I think.
Oh, absolutely. And it's also this feeling that like, okay, well, it's January. It's gonna be spring before we know it.
Right.
Just a certain, I guess there's some, it feels finite, the sort of the worst of it, the
Yeah.
hunkering down and, rescheduling things and all of that. But yeah, so we had well, at some point, right, so whenever we finished the record and kind of really hustled that because of, I think without it probably being too explicit, just like really need the stuff as soon
Yeah.
as you can get it. And I think he was already aware of some of the emerging supply chain issues and
Right.
production delays, industry wide. And so we did a show in September. We'd been planning. The idea was out because, I mean, it's like, imagine Boston and Chicago can be a lot alike in this sense that when it's cold, it's just brutal.
It's cold. Yeah.
Right. And,
Yeah.
so yeah, when Joe died, I just remember, it was like the funeral was one of those, like a 5-degree day, and we're all
Yeah.
bundled up and huddled in the parking lot, talking about, well, I guess we should all get together in the summer or something, summer or fall, whatever, when it's nice, and when our hands are, fingers aren't,
Yeah,
falling
right.
off.
Well, and
So
that was
yeah,
before everybody was really vaxxed and all that too, right? Is
right. Oh
back in
yeah,
January. Yeah.
that's right. Yeah,
So
I
there's
don't think
still a
that
lot of that social distancing stuff was
it
was
hadn't
more
opened up.
prevalent. Yeah.
Yeah, right. I think, like maybe my parents had just gotten vaccinated. I think
Yeah.
that's about where we were. And yeah, so we did. So yeah, finally September comes around and we did this event, which by then, because Delta like already had to be scaled down a bit because it was at our freest again, in that nothing's ever going to go wrong again period that we were discussing.
Right.
It was, like it was getting every artist that Joe had ever played with or who admired him, or we had this huge thing set up and like people going inside and outside. And then, the venue is like, okay, that's really now that looks very unsafe. And I think 4 artists outside is about what we could do. Then, well, that's fine. People are we're very understanding about it. So we did it was the first time Jim and I played without Joe, and
Mm.
did a Hushdrops show. And it was just kind of learning how to do it, learning how to do it again, learning how to do it in a different way. And we learned a lot from it. And then I think decided, both of us that, I don't think Joe would have wanted us to stop. I don't think, this is just, it's a very meaningful part of our lives. And, people seem to keep coming to
Yeah.
hear this music, experience this music, play the way we play it. So yeah, we decided, all right, well, we got a record coming out, let's do some shows. And we did a gig in December, and John Perrin from the Josh Caterer Trio actually on drums, and set up this, the first couple months of this year as sort of real, all right, we're just going to hit all the markets that we need to hit, to promote the album. And at this point, I'm pretty philosophical about it. Like, it may all get canceled or postponed. And it's not the end of the world if it does. I think there was a time in my life, maybe as the as the band leader and the person who would put all of these things together and sort of really try to make the timing pop in a certain way, where if anything, fell through or felt, sabotaged, act of God, whatever,
Yeah.
it just seemed like a huge deal. It seemed like a real catastrophe. And now, again, I think it's one of those things we're at a stage collectively where it's like, you know what, I'm not dead, actually things are going
Right.
pretty great,
Yeah. Right.
Somebody can't buy the album in January, they'll buy it in April,
Right.
that sort of thing.
Right. Will you and Jim continue to make music together, you think, as a something, whether it's Hushdrops or not?
I hope so. I think I mean, beyond performing, which is sort of the thing now, I think if I wrote a series of songs that I felt strongly about, that would absolutely be the outlet. And and ultimately that is Hushdrops music. One of the things that had happened is that our second album, Tomorrow, which was a double, that had come out in 2014, and we toured for about a year on it. You know, and in my van, very sporadically,
Yeah.
just weekend trips where you'd do 2 dates and be home Sunday evening. But you know, at the end of that, we'd sort of, as a band, just the three of us had kind of hit a certain gridlock in terms of our just our dynamic, our working together. And I went off and made a solo album. And you know, it was one of those things like somebody, it's like a cliche, like, well, you said you wanted to be the boss, you know, where, and I found that, yeah, theoretically, I had my
Yeah.
name on the marquee, but there was something just deeply unsatisfying about it. It's like, well, yeah, you know, I don't have Joe, and I don't have to deal with, I don't have to deal with my best friends anymore,
Yeah. Right.
but also, where's my best friends?
Yeah.
And,
Right.
you know, and it's just the sort of, you know, I learned, and we all learned that you couldn't go play with you couldn't go play with some other group of people and achieve the same satisfaction, the same chemistry, friction, result, whatever it was. Um, so I think I needed to learn that. Um, and that when the three of us came back together, I mean, certainly speaking for myself, but I mean, this is also what I got from Joe and Jim, was that each of us had this very, very new and heightened appreciation for the band. And you know, I don't know, it was like, you know, it's like some fable about a kid running away from home or something, and then
Yeah.
realizing, like, he smelled his mother's oatmeal and realized, you know. So yeah, that was sort of the experience that we had, and that has its own value, I think, you know.
Sure.
So yeah, just in terms of mine and Jim's ongoing musical relationship and friendship, um, I think we already took the course where we already audited that lesson, you know.
Right. I don't want to take up too much of your evening. We've gone over an hour, and I like to try to keep things a little tidy and be respectful of people's times. Thanks for doing this. I will
This
put
is
links in all the descriptions about where people can find all the Hushdrops material and where they can buy physical copies of the new album and all that stuff, and watch the videos. Because the video that you put together for Only a Man, Just a Man, I'm
oh,
bad
what is
with
that?
names.
One of the guys.
One of the
Yeah.
guys. There we go. Only a Man. Yeah. It's really cool. That's a really, really well done video. And if now that people have listened to the whole thing, if they know the story of Joe and his passing and his sort of importance to the band, it'll pull at your heartstrings.
Oh God, yeah. I feel like we might have gotten that one right. Yeah.
Yeah, I think so.
Well, I've had a great time. Had a great time hanging this evening.
Yeah, thank you. This is, like I said, it's the third year of quarantine, but I'm glad we're able to actually do things like this. And I know some people frown on Zoom and have been Zoom fatigued and whatever, but to me, it's a way of actually connecting with and talking to people. And having the camera on forces me to be present. And because when I
Yes.
get on the phone, I tend to, my mind
Oh
wanders and
man,
my ADD is ripping sometimes. So knowing that I've got my
brother.
ring light on and we can see each other, like, to
Yeah.
me, that's like, okay, I have to be on. Like you
Um,
said, in recording a live stream, right? You have to be video ready and audio ready and the whole thing.
Yeah, no, it's a good way. Yeah, and you're right. I mean, I'm also, yeah, just why didn't they, maybe they didn't have a diagnosis when I was a kid, but
Yeah.
yeah, I notice it when I get on the phone that, like, you know, my wife will say it like, you did a lot of pacing today. You probably should have been recording your steps in some way. Because yeah, I
Yeah.
think you got them all in during that, you know,
Yeah. That's funny.
phone call.
I'm exactly the same way. Yeah. Doing phone interviews. Prior to doing this thing that I guess we're calling a podcast, I did a lot of interviews over the phone because I pretended I was a writer and so put stories together. And yeah, half my interviews, I pacing from one end of the house to the other. And so knowing that I have to be like present at a thing, it's a different sort of vibe, which I enjoy. And I like not having to transcribe interviews anymore.
Oh yeah, no, we're done with that. It's kind of nice. Yeah.
It's not a thing. Yeah. Now just put it on a podcast.